All right. Welcome, folks. So this is, I think, video or recording number 5 that we are doing on the channel. So what are we going to talk about today? So today we are going to talk about survivorship bias, right? Uh, so a concept which I happen to, really like to, uh, look at the world. It's like one of the ways in which you can sort of end up seeing the world. Uh, Now, before you even sort of get into into the video, I would like to mention that who this video is for. In case you are absolutely unaware of what survivorship bias is, uh, I would say watch the video. In case you really know what survivorship bias is, you know everything about it inside out. How to look at life, look at events, look at whatever is happening in life through the lens of survivorship bias, then probably skip this video because there's not a lot that you'll be adding to what you already know, right? So that's the people for for whom this video is going to be. Now uh, but of course, if you'd like to watch, please, go ahead because I'll be sharing some, stories as well and how I came to know about this whole concept and how some of the stories from my experience and how I ended up seeing this uh, when it comes to, looking at life, right? Uh, so that's basically this video about. Now, so let's sort of get started. Uh, so throughout the video, I think I'll really sort of dumb down what this whole concept is, and uh, will really dumb down what this whole concept is, and I'll try to explain like I'm sort of explaining this to like a 5-year old, right? Uh, so that's what we'll see today. Now, what exactly is it? And also, okay, before I end up talking about what is it, I think the best example to understand this is through the story, which uh, is something I've written down here, and then we'll also go into and dig into this particular article by Farnham Street, which I think pretty much encapsulates what survivorship bias really is, right? So this article, the story. In fact, I've taken this part from the article itself, and you end up seeing this plane, and what really is it? Uh, I really remember at a point of time when I was just having a like a video call with someone, and this was around last year, and then this was just the time around when I had I was really sort of exploring this topic all by myself, the topics of psychological effects, cognitive biases, and all that, right? And then, of course, I think survivorship bias is something that you should not forget in life. So what I did was I ended up having it as my wallpaper on my phone. And then the time I showed this to a friend of mine, she said, "How is it?" So I tried to ask her, "What do you say this is?" And she ended up saying that it looks like these are planes and there are some flowers on the planes, but uh, spoiler alert that those are not uh, roses. That's something else altogether. Uh, so yeah, that's been my wallpaper ever since. Uh, right. So yeah, we'll see what survivorship bias really is. I'm not again sure how long this video is, going to be, but we'll get started. Uh, as I said, right, even before I sort of go into what this whole thing is, I think uh, what I would like to talk about is that the time you understand this concept, it's like you end up seeing it everywhere. Of course, I'll talk about this, more in depth, but then the time you end up exploring this particular thing, you end up seeing it pretty much everywhere else, pretty much everywhere, literally everywhere, right? Everywhere. And it's a good way to think about how wrong can you be? Not just that, it also is like a good way to enter into that whole rabbit hole of understanding psychological effects and cognitive biases, right? I think this is like that most well-known concept around the world. And then, through this, you can step into all the other things, right? So that's pretty much about the intro, I guess. Now let's sort of get into what survivorship bias really is. So what you see here, of course, these are not roses. These are bullets basically that have been hit on a plane. So where does it really begin? Now, the most well-known story associated with survivorship bias happens to be this story that we are going to see right now. So I'm just gonna quickly read out the story. Of course, you'll understand it as the time I read it. So let's just keep with that. And in case I have any points to share, I'll definitely add to it once I'm done reading. Right. So let's get into it. When we read about survivorship bias, we usually come across the archetypical story of Abraham Ward, a statistician studying World War II planes. His research group at Columbia University was asked to figure out how to better protect airplanes from damage. The initial approach to the problem was to look at the planes coming back, seeing where they were hit the worst, then reinforcing that area. However, Ward realized there was something missing yet valuable source of evidence. Planes that were hit did not make it back. Planes that went down, that weren't surviving, had much better information to provide on areas that were most important to reinforce. Wall's approach is an example of how to overcome survivorship bias. Don't just look at what you see, consider all the things that started on the same path but didn't make it. Try to figure out their story, as there is as much, if not more, to be learned from failure. Right? So that basically is the story of survivorship bias. Once we go into the article, of course, we'll talk about it in that. But then overall, what you end up seeing is your intuition. This whole thing, this whole scenario, this whole, and also not just that, right? These are not just some noob people. These are not just people like some very normal people who have been just picked up from uh, a random set of people to ask them to do research. These are solid people who are asked to do something at the Columbia University, right? So they can be wrong. Just imagine they can be wrong. So that kind of also makes you think that you and the common janta and pretty much everyone else can be really wrong when it comes to understanding situations, when it comes to understanding things, right? So that exactly is the concept. And again, I keep sort of saying that I think wisdom is in knowing that you are wrong, is in accepting that you are wrong, and you need to know more, and that by default you are wrong, right? And there's always stuff which you need to add to things that you know, things that you already do not know, and you can never know everything at once, right? Uh, so yeah. So imagine these people getting that situation wrong, reading that situation wrong, and then they realizing, oh, okay, this is what we need to do, right? So also like my whole uh phone wallpaper. It's something as a good conversation starter sometimes. So what happens is, so in case someone ends up looking at my phone and then they are sort of curious enough, uh, we end up having a conversation around this whole thing. Oh, okay, what's your wallpaper about, right? I've had some conversations around that as well. And then I start of telling them, oh, okay, this is what happened, this is what happened. Now, these people, Abraham Wald was, tasked with studying these planes who were, they wanted to make the planes safer. Now, the data point what they basically have is the set of planes that they came back, right? And then this is the red spots that you see, that happens to be the points where the bullets had hit the most, right? So it's like the plane has been shot from the ground, and that particular thing was the pattern of the bullets that ended up hitting on the planes that they basically had to study. Now imagine the planes, uh, let's say they were in Britain and they wanted to hit in Germany. Now, these people in Britain wanted to make these planes safer. So now what would they do, right? After seeing the pattern of bullets, it's very intuitive to think that, oh, okay, यहाँ पे bullet लगा है, so let's add some padding, let's make this safer, right? And a lot of people end up thinking that, oh, okay, there's a bullet here, so let's cover this up, let's make this safer so that it becomes safer. It's a very intuitive thing to do. But then no, right? Like that's so thing is, uh from Britain, this particular plane that came back to you along with the pilot, right? This is definitely not this whole thing is definitely not happening after 1960. So World War II, right? So this whole research is not happening after 1960. So what is it, right? So there were of course no pilotless planes or that whole drone technology and all that, right? So these planes that the data that you happen to have, uh, it is from the planes that came back along with the pilot, right? So try to imagine that, try to understand that. And what happens later is, you don't quite have the data of the planes that crashed over there, right? Like it's in enemy's territory. You don't have access to that particular plane along with that particular pilot, right? But then that is the plane that crashed. What you're seeing right now with you in Britain is the plane that survived and came back after hitting all these bullets, right? So the plane, and again, this is the pattern that you see for the bullets. uh so now intuitively, again, as I said, I've been saying that okay, this is the place where we should add some more padding, but no, this is the plane that actually came back, right? So the spots where bullets are not quite there, those are the weak spots, right? Those are the spots where you need to make them stronger, so that those are the parts that were hit and then they did not survive, right? So that exactly is the story around survivorship bias, right? A lot of times intuitively we end up taking wrong decisions, we end up having a wrong judgment when it comes to understanding things. And again, quick reminder that understanding people, the people around you, they come from their own reality, they come from their own backgrounds, uh from their own past, their cool lived experiences and all that, right? And again, as Morgan Housel, the guy behind Psychology of Money, says, a lot of uh, not just in investing but also in other aspects of life, right? A lot of people end up behaving, acting and doing stuff based on their own lived experience, right? So that's how things are, right? So by default, understand that people will have a different process of making one particular decision. Uh, so that that should give you a hint that try to be a little more accepting. Try to understand where they are coming from. Their reality is different. How they'll make a decision is going to be different. Uh, someone, for example, like recently there is like a friend of mine, right, who I've been around with, and then imagine suddenly you get to know, after like almost a year of friendship, that this person happens to be an anti-vaxxer, right? Now what do you do with that information, right? You probably can confront that friend. Oh, okay, how can you do this? How can you not do this? Right? How can you think like that? Right? Or probably if I would have been, which I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I can, let's say, had it been a person who is an anti-vaxxer, that person will probably, oh, okay, sounds cool. We happen to have like a common point. Let's talk more. Let's explore more. Right? Let's spend more time. Why do you think the whole hoax and all that, right? So that's basically the thing, right? So people come from their own reality. So try to be a little more accepting, try to know where they're coming from, try to understand them a little bit better, right? Be a little bit more accepting. Right. So I kind of lost my train of thought, but I think we've covered this particular story that sort of encapsulates what survivorship bias really is, right? Uh, so that is the starting point for this particular video, right? Uh, Now that's the story. Now, what is it survivorship bias? We've seen. We've pretty much seen it. Uh, okay. Now, I think in some time we'll go to the article. We'll go to the article later. What we'll do for now is uh, where do you see it, right? Okay. Now let's sort of go to the article and we'll know because the rest of the points are about going deeper into survivorship bias, right? Okay, so what I'll try to do is I've gone through the article once. What I'll do now is just briefly get around the article and depending I haven't quite thought through what are the points that I'm going to cover. But let's let's dig into the article. It's not a very long one. Uh, but I'm sort of hoping that I'll be able to share some interesting stories and insights. Let's see. Uh, but again, just to understand the survivorship bias, I think this article is a pretty good guide to sort of get started with, right? So, survivorship bias is a common logical error that distorts our understanding of the world. Happens when we assume that success tells the whole story, and when we don't adequately consider past failures. There are thousands, even tens of thousands of failures for every big success in the world, but stories of failure not as sexy as stories of triumph. So they rarely get covered and shared. As we assume one story of success after another, we get the base rates and overestimate the odds of real success. See, he says, you you who deny a providence, how many have you saved by their prayers to the gods? A, says Diagoras, I see those who were saved, but where are those painted who were shipwrecked? Right? So this is not sure who this person is. See, okay, philosopher, Roman statesman, right? Cool, wise words. Right. So we'll go in parts. We'll dissect what the whole thing is. I think there's like one or two major examples that I'll try to stick to, or let's see. So the thing for now, after reading this, it sort of reminds me of you know the whole story of IITs and how the whole world, at least in India for sure, that you end up hearing the thing ki, okay, just go to an IIT, your life will be sorted and all that, right? But then going there is another form of sacrifice altogether, right? Uh, Preparation and all that, like there's a whole industry in quota. Never was a fan of it, never will be a fan of it, honestly. uh it's like its own echo chamber which you know uh has been around, and I fell into that trap as well, right? I mean, after my 12, after my class 10, I was pretty clueless what exactly needs to be done. And then since you sort of had good enough decent marks, I think I had come like third in the school. Again, it's just something that happened, man. Like, nothing quite special about it. Just something that happened, and didn't quite have any option, right? For sure, I knew something that okay, like the human body is something that is I'm not very comfortable with. Like staying in that particular shape and form, right? When it comes to medical and all that, so sort of knew that it's not a thing with me for me. So was the other option left, engineering and your whole IIT prep. So I fell into that trap as well. My reality was that some people who had told me, okay, this is what happens, this is what happens, I was pretty, I think back in the days, I was sort of very, uh, since uh, we uh while sort of growing up, we did not quite have so easy access to information. We sort of used to think, oh, okay, man, like companies like TCS and Infosys are like the best place where you can probably work at, and all those things, right? But again, like I was small, and then it turns out no one was there to give me like good reality check, right? So I fell into that trap. 11th, 12th, I did that, coaching thing. Fortunately, I was home. I'm glad I didn't go anywhere else, live by all by myself, just suppressing all of my emotions, not doing anything for myself, studying for like 12 hours and, all that. Never was a fan of it. Never will be a fan of it. Would never ask anyone or would recommend anyone to do that. It's not a healthy thing to do, honestly, right? Uh, so yeah, that's the IIT story, right? That's what happened with me as well. Some people gave me a reality that okay, this is what needs to be done and all that. I think later I optimized for a good city. I optimized for stepping out of home, just to have that particular hostel experience and living the bachelor's life. Because had I been in the same city, it would have just been like an extension of what I had lived for the whole 18 years of my life, and I didn't quite want that. Plus, being lazy, I absolutely could not imagine waking up, probably going 7-10 kilometers across one particular college which is around in the city, and then coming back at 6:30 in the evening because no, not because that is how probably I had lived across, the years as well. So just didn't want, my whole life to be an extension of that scenario. So optimized for college, optimized for some of the other things, optimized for a city, a decent city, and then Pune happened in my life, right? So that's basically how it is, right? Okay, I think I'm really going off the topic, but then coming to the IIT thing, right? So going there in itself is an sacrifice altogether, which you need to do, right? Of course, there are some people who are really good at it, and again it's something that you end up learning. It's something that you need to develop a thing in case you have like some pretty good exam must surroundings where people can you have like the supportive environment where you've seen, okay, this is what happens, and you can make sense of things. uh then it's there, right? And again, I think this is really going into that IIT zone thing, but then the last thing that I also want to talk about is, I sort of do not make sense that how your cognitive endurance and all those things and, your ability to solve mathematical problems and, all those things can be that only deciding factor when it comes to getting into a college, right? Of course, I do understand that there are no better means right now to, because the population is so high, there are no better means to, gauge someone's ability, uh, that they are worthy of that particular thing. And then what again happens is oh god, what's that effect? I think I'm gonna pause for a minute. I'll get started again. uh, right, so the thing that I was going to talk about is Goodhart's law. So Goodhart's law states that basically you end up optimizing thing for whatever it is. For example, uh simple example, for example, after class 10, a school has this particular thing, this is what needs to be done and all that. These are the percentage of people who graduated and passed and all that stuff. uh what happens is you end up optimizing for that particular percentage after class 10, that CGPA that you happen to have in college, your class 12 percentage or grades, or whatever that is. I do think things are, I do feel things are getting better. I think they've scrapped that whole percentage grade and they switched to something like grades. So you get A plus plus or something like that. But yeah, things are still the same. To be honest, I do end up meeting a lot of people who are, meeting a lot of kids who are in that particular age, who are just going for 10th. and then they come to like a very cool, vibey, they love spending time at a particular event, but then they later say, okay, I'll not be able to, come around because my class 10 is starting, and then pretty much everyone needs to study, everyone needs to, top the class and all that, right? uh so yeah, yeah, things are still the same. A lot of people have not, what happened with me even after 10 years, Three Idiots has come down, there's a lot more awareness, Gen Z, internet boom, and even post COVID, things are just there. Like it's not gotten better. Uh, at least in, the set of people that I've been speaking with, there are still students suffering and all that, right? Okay, so good arts log, and I'm very, very digressing. I'm not sure how long this video is going to be. I think we've already crossed like 20-27 minutes. But good arts law states that 10th ka percentage is this thing that you wanna, optimize for. So let's only do that and neglect pretty much everything else, right? So that's basically good hearts law. Um, so that's good hearts law. Now, quickly, coming back to the thing about the article, right? So sort of, I think the last couple of minutes turned out to be an IIT rant, but hey, like why not IIT rant, right? An engineering rant. So the basics, coming down to survivorship bias once again. Okay, so a college dropout becomes a billionaire. Bulati Lamichane, a chain smoker, lives to the age of 180. Four young men are rejected by record labels and told guitar groups are on the way out. Then go on to become the most successful band in history. I think they are talking about the Beatles. Bill Gates, Batuli Lamy Chan, and the Beatles. Yes, they are talking about the Beatles. Are often cited examples of people who broke the rules without expected consequence. We like to focus on people like them, the result of a cognitive shortcut known as survivorship bias. When we only pay attention to those who survive, we fail to account for the base rates and end up misunderstanding how selection processes actually work. The base rate is the probability of a given result we can expect from a sample, expressed as a percentage. If you play roulette, for example, you can be expected to win one of the 38 games or 2.63 percentage, which is the base rate. The problem arises when we mistake the winners for the rule and not the exception. People like Bill Gates, Lamy Chane, and honestly, I do not know who this person is. I'm sorry. All right, the chain smoke. So Beatles and anomalies at the end of a distribution curve. While there is much to learn from them, it would be a mistake to expect the same results doing the same things. Okay? And there's a quote, of course, legendary Daniel Kahneman. A stupid decision that works out well becomes a brilliant decision in hindsight, right? So again, sort of cool example to understand hindsight bias is uh, the whole concept of course, there are examples here. So once after the conversation started, when people, ask me, okay, what's survivorship bias and all that. Sometimes when I run out of topics to talk about people, I tell them, okay, like I'll tell you what survivorship bias is, and then it works with some people, it does not work with some people. Some people get interested, some people do not get interested. But yeah, I try it anyway. Uh, yeah. So uh, once I tell them, okay, this is what intuition and this is what they did and all that, right? So basically, the whole concept is around. I explain them the concept, and the whole concept is around, you know, how we end up seeing people like Mark Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, and all that, right? So they had their own reality. They ended up doing things, but then when we are celebrating these people, what we are neglecting is the set of people. I'm sure there must be thousands of people who really wanted to be Mark Zuckerberg. I'm sure there are, if not thousands, at least hundreds of people who have tried to be what Steve Jobs ended up doing. Uh, right? But then when we celebrate these people, we do not account for those set of people, right? And that is the error. And that is the error. Again, the same IIT story that, okay, this is what happened. This is after graduating from IIT, this person went to there and then they got like a 5 crore salary package and all that. But then that's like one person. What again in the story, in that particular line, we are ignoring is all the set of people who were competing for that, salary. We are also neglecting the set of people who, even in the first place, were preparing for an IIT, right? And they did not get into that particular college, right? So that's basically uh, having that lens in life makes things easy, makes things easy, right? So that basically is about it, and right. So I think that's all to sort of talk about here. Now let's understand what is the cause and effect. Can we achieve anything if we try hard enough? Not necessarily. Survivorship bias leads to an erroneous understanding of cause and effect. People see correlation in mere coincidence. We all love to hear stories of those who beat the odds and become successful, holding them up as proof that the impossible is possible. We ignore failures in the pursuit of coherent narrative about success. Few would think to write the biography of a business person who goes bankrupt and spends their entire life in debt, or a musician who tried again and again to get signed and was ignored by record labels, or of someone who dreams of becoming an actor, moves to LA and ends up returning an year later, defeated and broke. After all, who wants to hear that? We want encouragement and survivorship bias provides, and the subsequent belief is our capability. The result is an inflated idea of how many people become successful. The discouraging fact is that success is never guaranteed. Most businesses fail. Most people do not become rich or famous. Most leaps of faith go wrong. It does not mean we should not try, just that we should be realistic with our understanding of reality. And again, this is a quote: beware of advice from the successful. Right. So, as I said, like by the end of it, in case you do not know what survivorship bias really is, and again, if in case you're watching, till the end of it, you'll end up seeing survivorship bias pretty much everywhere, right? So cause and effect. Simple thing. I think I'll just take the second paragraph and talk a little. Of course, I've talked about it in the Mark Zuckerberg example as well. So we end up ignoring a lot of people who in the first place wanted to become X, wanted to become this, and then a lot of people say, okay, this is what happened, this is what they did, right? Just to give like general fluff, motivation and all that, right? It works. Maybe it works for some people. Some people end up doing that, but then the reality is quite different, right? What again we are neglecting is how they did that particular thing. uh but then just saying that, oh, okay, this person achieved this, Sharma ji ka beta and all that, is a pretty it's a very noob concept. It's like just like playing dumb, to be honest, right? Uh, so that's basically about that. We are neglecting a lot of things. And then one thing that we need to understand is a lot of people are just normal people, just like people that you'll end up seeing around, right? Uh, so currently, if you were to ask me, have I even stepped out of India? Not yet. But do I have 60-page passport which I made during the pandemic? Absolutely yes. When am I going to step out of India? I have absolutely no clue. Would I like to step out of India? Be it a vacation or be it work? Absolutely yes, right? So yeah, right. So just a normal person who likes doing stuff, just a normal person who has a family, is living around in this particular city, is doing some things, is not doing some things, is doing what uh, you know he likes to do, is doing work. I'm working at a company. I am if I like something, then I like to work on that project as well, right? So that's basically a normal person, right? uh, I also do a lot of dumb things, uh, right? And just like a lot of normal people, right? So most people are normal people. For someone to really do or get something exceptional, that is a different sacrifice altogether. So as the last paragraph says, right, it's the discouraging fact is that success is never guaranteed. You do not know what is going to happen, and what I've observed is what is going to happen is almost something that you never imagined, right? I never sort of thought had anyone asked me in 2018, 2019, okay, would you be coming back to your hometown, Nagpur? Uh, I'll just tell them, no chance, no chance, I'm not doing that, right? And no one could see that. But then here I am when, 2020 happened. Here I am. Was sort of thinking that I'll probably go back to the city, but then that never happened. I did think about it. I had to think through, but then things just sort of settled in place, and yeah, here I am. Here I am in the city, right? And do I have any plans of moving out of this place immediately? No, right? So that's basically life. You never know what is going to happen. Uh, Right. So that's you just need to keep doing stuff, and then what happens eventually will happen eventually. What needs to happen will happen. Uh Something that you probably thought, you know, uh uh went on a good note, but then at a point of time later things got rough, and you don't quite are. So something like a relationship with someone, right? Like it started off well, just like, and of course there's also this, right? Okay, so invite, get the story right, spelling right. So there's also this thing, right? So okay, uh this is the one that we need to see, the purple one. uh So again, it's like another, boy meets girl story in which, the boy meets girl, and something, good happens, and there's something wrong happens, and end, end is here, and beginning is here. I is ill fortune. Uh, G is good, right? So something good happens, it peaks, and then, the peak is there for some time, and then something wrong happens, right? Some bad shit happens, and now this is the key point. This is the key point where what, how willing are you to, compromise, come back, and uh, how feasible do you find this as a, long term thing? And here is when things sort of get tricky. So you again, about the thing that is going to go wrong, you do not know what is going to go wrong, right? And it will just come as a surprise. It'll just come like an elephant, that was right behind you and it's going to hit you sometime, right? So that's basically, how it's going to be. And then after this, some good thing might happen, right? Uh, of course, if we look at this graph, it you can take it as one whole journey when probably two people work together, and you can also take it as a single 1 week long thing in which kuch chota mota something minor happens, and then you still sort of end up coming back together, uh वैसे, right? So that's basically how it is. uh Right. So discouraging fact that is, most people are normal people. Most people are just doing stuff just like a lot of normal people do. Spend time with family, work, earn some, invest some, do things they like, do things they do not like. Uh, right. And most businesses fail, right? I think for sure I'll be, I'm not sure when, but for sure what I'll do is I'll cover a video around group thinking, right? I think I don't quite have the material around it yet. What exactly I'll talk about, but then this whole thing that about the group thinking one, I think, uh, again, being an armchair intellectual, that in this case a stool intellectual, stool and cushion intellectual. But yeah, I think that businesses feel one is a lot of it. I'll try to relate that with group thinking. Uh, right. So most people do not become rich or famous. The leaps of faith might go wrong. It does not mean we should not try. Just that we should be realistic with our understanding of reality, right? So becoming more realistic in life and all that, right? Uh, Finally, coming down to the core, beware of advice from the successful. Now, the trend of us consuming videos has changed. You know, by default, we end up seeing Instagram Reels. By default, we end up seeing YouTube Shorts. And I can see the trend with me as well, right? Not very happy with it. Honestly, not at all happy with it, but then it's there. It's there, right? Uh, in fact, I need to sort of remember very consciously when was the last time the I ended up seeing a very worthy video on YouTube, right? A complete video in which I had the full attention and I, paid my full attention to that particular thing that was covered in the video, right? I don't quite remember that, right? So not a great trend. So now what happens in this shorts is, you'll probably have like a Shah Rukh Khan who comes in and says, a trimmed 10-second clip from one of his interviews, and then he'll say, okay, this is this, and this is that, right? Uh, but then it's coming when he has lived that particular thing, and only then he's able to articulate that particular line and that particular set of words. Uh, Now, the trick here is that the loophole here is like I do not know what really happened, like what was the backstory, what really happened, because he had his own lived experience across that particular thing, and that's why he's able to say that, right? But then I do not have that. I absolutely do not have that, and in most cases, most of the people, like almost everyone who's watching that video, they are not going to know, okay, where this is coming from, right? So that general fluff, general gyan, motivation and all that. I mean, it sort of works well. I think, motivation as a business is quite a thing in itself. Uh, that motivational content and all that in itself is quite a big thing. Uh, right? But then, okay, that's how it is. But then, understanding that this is not something that might not work for you is important, right? So that's how things are. Right. So survivorship bias in business. So what I see is, you know, the article does not talk about what, how we can see this in something like, day-to-day interactions, our friendships, the set of people that we are with. Uh, but then you can always draw parallels. Okay. Once you understand this, you can always sort of draw parallels uh, to the whole thing. Now, survivorship bias in business. So, survivorship bias is particularly common in the world of business. Companies which fail early on are ignored, while the rare successes are lauded for decades. Studies of market performance often exclude companies which collapse, which can this can distort statistics and make success seem more probable than it truly is. Just as history is written by the winners, so in much of our knowledge about business, those who end up broke and chastened lack a real voice. They may be blamed for their failures by those who ignore the role coincidence plays in the upward trajectories of the successful. Nassim Taleb writes our tendency to ignore the failures. We favor the visible, the embedded, the personal, the narrated, the tangible, we scorn the abstract. Business books laud the rule breakers who ignore conventional advice and still create profitable enterprises. For most entrepreneurs, taking excessive risk and eschewing all norms is an ill-advised gamble. Most of the misfit billionaires who widely celebrated success in spite of their unusual choices, not because of them. We also ignore the role of timing, luck, connections, and socio-economic background. A person from prosperous family with valuable connections who founds a business at a lucrative time has a greater chance of survival, even if they drop out of college or do something unconventional. Someone with a different background, starting at acting at an unopportune time, will have less of a chance. Right? How big is this? Okay, we'll read it up. In no startup histories, build scalable technology companies. Samir Rath and Theodora Georgieva, right? Almost every single generic presentation for startups starts with 95% of all startups fail. But very rarely do we pause for a moment and think, what does it really mean? We nod our heads in somber acknowledgement and with great enthusiasm turn to the heroes who made it, Zuckerberg, Gates, etc., to absorb pearls of wisdom and find the holy grail of building successful companies. Learning from the successful is a much deeper problem and can reduce the probability of success more than we might imagine. Examining the lives of successful entrepreneurs teaches us very little. How would we would do far better to analyze the cause of failures than act accordingly. Even better would be learning both from failures and successes. Focusing on what successful outliers does not account for basis, as Rath and George Georgina go on to write. After any process that picks up winners, the non-survivors are often destroyed or hidden or removed from public view. The huge failure rate for startups is a classic example. If failures become invisible, not only do we fail to recognize that missing instances had hold important information, but we may also fail to acknowledge that there is any missing information at all. They describe how this leads us to base our choices on inaccurate assumptions. Often, as we reveal in stories of startup founders who struggle their way through on cups of ramen before the tide finally turned on viral product launches, high team performance, strategic partnership, we forgot how many other founders do the same thing in the same industry and perish. The problem we mention is compounded by biographical or autobiographical narratives. Human brain is obsessed with building a cause and effect narrative. The problem arises when the cognitive machinery misfires and finds pattern where there are none. These success narratives are created both by those within successful companies and those outside. Looking back on their ramen days, founders may believe that they had a plan all along. They always knew everything would work out. In truth, they may lack an idea of the cause and effect relationship underlying their progress. When external observers hear their stories, they may, in quasi-superstitious manner, spot signs of the success to come. As Daniel Kahneman has written, the only true similarity is luck. Now, I think I'm gonna pause the video for like 5 seconds just to collect my thoughts. But then, uh, before I do that, the very last paragraph sort of reminds me of what hindsight bias really is. So hindsight bias is basically, I knew it all along effect, right? For example, an event is going to happen. For example, you sort of think that a friend of you is going to go through a breakup, and then you end up. Please don't say that to that person, but then probably to a friend or something. But you end up saying that, oh, okay, I knew this is what is going to happen. I knew this all along, right? So that's hindsight bias. And again, a simple example. Uh, right. So that's good. So we covered quite a bit here. That's why, right? I'm gonna pause the video, collect my thoughts, and then get started. Right. So I'm only going to talk about this this particular paragraph, this particular part. Uh, now, and of course, like you can talk about this thing endlessly. You can look at it, can uh, see the whole concept around in other aspects of life as well, right? So, when it comes to sort of the media industry and all that, right? Everything is optimized so that everything is catchy, everything is nice, stuff is good, glamour, vibrant colors, right? Success stories, great stories, stuff that happened for real, stuff that was interesting and all that, right? Uh, the article does mention that it does not cover, we don't. look at the stories that feed. That's by default our human nature. I also look at it this way. I remember talking to a friend of mine, right? And we happened to have like many mutuals, and then we sort of ended up, talking about some of the people who are running communities in the city, what exactly that they are doing, because community is something that is very hard to monetize, right? And then monetizing a community in itself in the first place is something that you are killing the community in the first place, right? So that's a trick. That's a tricky thing, right? How do you sort of monetize that? And once you have like a set of people, where do they go and all that, right? So we were discussing that, okay, this person runs a community, and but then where are they earning, right? So we talked about a few people, but then something, of course, that we did not talk about is the set of people in the first place who might have thought around this particular thing. Uh, you know, Having a community, probably also monetizing a community to some extent, plus also something, going on their own side, and then that is something that is generating you income so that you can focus on this particular thing, your side project thing, right? But then that did not happen. That we only talked about the people who were doing quite solid stuff. uh, their community is established, they are the face of that particular community, but then, also on the other hand, like things are so much sorted on their, work front that, they can give time to both, right? So, how do you do that? So, absolutely, we did not talk about, the set of people who, the failure stories, because we just did not know, right? We just did not know about them. No one talked about it. No one knew, okay, this is what this person did and then this failed, right? Like people generally do not talk around, something on those lines. And also when it comes to, human nature is, it's unless it's like your close circle, it's difficult for us to talk about our own failures, right? So that is how things are, I think. Okay, so that's the whole media business. What we end up seeing in newspapers, what we end up seeing in television, news channels, and all that, right? And also magazines, uh, pretty much everything, pretty much any sort of content that we end up consuming. On Twitter, it's tough. Of course, some people have started to do that, building in public, sharing your failures and all that. Like it's like a sign of vulnerability, and then vulnerability leads to, I think deeper connections with people, right? Uh, it's so about the Twitter thing, right? So some people, it's difficult to, see stories where people have like for real feel, and then, the ones in which for real feel ones, people are, you know those are not going to be like the hit stories, right? But again, I'm generalizing my own thoughts, so I know I can be wrong, but just putting that point across there, I know I'm wrong. I know that that statement has its own, flip side, and it can be proven wrong because, of course, there are exceptions. But yeah, so I'll just keep it out there. Okay, so we've seen this, we have seen this. Now, whole concept of survivorship bias is consider what is, that you do not see, right? Just try to see the unseen, right? We've seen these two paragraphs in the story initially. Now, quickly wrapping up. Considering survivorship bias when presented with examples of success is difficult. It is not instinctive to pause, reflect, and think through what the base rate odds of success are and whether you're looking at an outlier or an expected outcome. And yet, if you don't know the real odds, if you don't know what you're looking at is an example of survivorship bias, then you've got a blind spot. Let me read that again. And yet, if you don't know the real odds, if you don't know if what you're looking at is an example of survivorship bias, then at a blind spot. Whenever you read about a success story in the media, Think of all the people who try to do what the person did and failed. Of course, understanding survivorship bias isn't an excuse for not taking action, but rather an essential tool to help you cut through the noise and understand the world. If you're going to do something, do it fully informed, right? So, two book recommendations. I think that Darius Fufux is like the author of The Art of Clear Thinking. No, not that guy. I think that's Thinking Straight or something. So haven't quite read this book or Talib at all. Haven't read any of him, but I sort of do know what he have a brief idea of what he talks about, right? Right. So just two paragraphs, and we'll sort of come to an end of the video. So considering survivorship an example of success, and as I said, it's sort of repeating the same thing. And the one thing that quite catch my attention is the last line, right? If you don't know if what you're looking at is an example of survivorship bias, then you don't quite know the whole story. Is that you're looking at a blind spot, right? Uh, Again, noob example is like again a noob example is a person comes to you and this person had like 500 medals when it comes to swimming, and he is a teenager, 18-year-old, right? Great at sports, great at friendships, great at maths, great at sports, great at pretty much anything that you can throw at that person, right? Uh, but of course, you sort of need to know the flip side as well, right? When it comes to studying, when it comes to his swimming, when it comes to his medals, when it comes to that person's, family, academics, and pretty much everything else. Of course, there are also people in that same line routine trying to be good at that particular thing. It's just that pretty much everyone who is going to be in that particular sample have their own different stories. And that's why this person's story sort of stands out because he's done quite exceptionally well. That person has done exceptionally well just because they did some sacrifices. Probably they were in a supportive environment. Probably they had all the stuff so that they could get the thing right at the right time. And as we also saw, that Bill Gates, right? Bill Gates, I'll touch upon that as well. Uh, what I'm looking for is, you know, uh, how Bill Gates sort of got to where he is today, right? So that's basically the ship has. Now, after seeing that person that exceptionally well student, okay, there's survivorship bias hai. Then if you do not know that is there, then my friend, you again need to study survivorship bias, right? So that's how things are. Understanding science is an excuse for taking action, but rather so basically it says that know that you could be wrong, know that whatever is being fed to you is not complete, right? And try to understand a flip side of things when it comes to any situation. Try to understand where things are coming from. Try to understand why in the first place something happened, and sort of try to make better decisions, well informed decisions, uh, and that will help you in the rest of the stuff of life, right? So that basically is survivorship bias. Okay. uh I think pretty much that's all right. Now let me come to like this article. Okay. uh, huh. Now the whole concept of luck, right? Being at the right place at the right time, in the right environment, right? At the right place at the right time. So this whole concept, this again, it's a hindsight bias, and the story goes on when it has already happened. You know, once we see this story, so Bill Gates basically was at one particular school, and then they had like one of the initial computers of that was accessible to them, and not many schools had that particular thing. He liked it. He ended up exploring his whole thing, And then he started Windows and all that, right? Had that school thing not happened, had the computer not been in place, had he not explored that particular thing in the first place, nothing would have happened for him, right? We won't have a Bill Gates today. But then let's not ignore that, of course, there were also kids in that particular school who probably would be, enough interested as Bill Gates was in that particular computer. But then what they did or tried to do did not quite take off, right? So here's the story. Roughly 303 million high school age people, 18 million live them in the US, 2,70,000 of them lived in Washington state. A little over a lakh of them lived in Seattle area, and only about 300 of them attended Lakeside School. 1 in million high school age students attend the high school that had the combination of cash and foresight to buy a computer. Bill Gates happened to be one of them. Gates is not shy about what this meant. If there had been no Lakeside, there would have been no Microsoft. So let me tell you about Microsoft's friend, Gates' friend, Kent Evans. He experienced an equally powerful dose of luck's close sibling, risk. Kent and Bill Gates became best friends in eighth grade. Evans was, by Gates' own account, the best student in the class. Kent could have been a founding partner of Microsoft with Gates and Paul Allen, but it would never happen. Kent died in a mountaineering accident before he graduated high school. The odds of being killed on a mountain in high school are roughly 1 in 1 million, right? So that, my friend, is how we got Bill Gates. But then also in that same story, there's this person who, unfortunately passed away in an accident, right? Uh, had had Kent, had this not happened with Kent, uh, probably, Microsoft would have been amazing, a lot more amazing. Probably, and we don't know the reality, right? And probably Kent would have been, the initial founder of Microsoft. It could also be a disaster. I mean, why not, right? Um, uh, we only have some limited information about the person because we hardly know anything about it, right? So the possibilities could be endless, right? So that, and again, this is from Psychology of Money, uh, right? So that's basically around survivorship bias. Now, coming finally to the notes, we've covered this, the story as well, the article, and lastly, I think I've pretty much talked about this as well, right? Like helps you make decisions when you consider, the flip side of things. Try to see the unseen in life. Now, when I say you end up seeing this everyone, I think that's where I'll stop the video for today. Uh, where where would you end up seeing survivorship bias all the time, right? College brochures, marriage biodata, like a good dating profile and all that, right? Pretty much everywhere. And then hoardings, ads, uh, IITs, we've talked enough about IITs. And then the concept of long tails is also something, taken from Psychology of Money, Morgan Housel, right? Now, so college brochures is again sort of a self-explanatory example that uh, basically when people are around and they distribute thing, oh, okay, a college has this infrastructure, this teacher and all that, right? Uh, so they're also sort of neglecting, nothing is perfect, right? Of course, there are some loopholes into the college. Uh, Let me talk about this, right? So I remember there's like a person who is in a well established position in the college, and then this person, to be honest, has horrible memory. Uh, we've spoken like twice or thrice. We've talked about one particular thing, uh, but it never executed, even after following up, right? And try to imagine, that, and initially you say that initially I was told that, oh, okay, let's do this, but then when I try to follow up, nothing quite happened, right? Uh, and also I sort of see this because we happen to have many mutuals, and uh, didn't quite have a great experience. Like beyond a point, so what I try to do is I have algorithms. Let's say when I send this, if I do not hear back in this, then I'll send a reminder, right? And then if I get a reminder and then they say they'll get back to me, then I say another reminder, and then one other reminder may if I do not hear back, then that's it. Then I sort of leave that particular thing. I don't look back at it. Right? So that's how I operate. I just operate, when I say this, and then just put, the thing in the other person, the ball in the other person's court, and just sit back and relax, and then only act when I get to know about the next step, not before that. Absolutely not before that, right? Helps you save things, helps you, with a lot of mental bandwidth as well. uh, right. So there's that, right? So college brochures, but then I also ended up sharing one particular example from my life where something didn't quite go wrong. Now, marriage biodata and dating apps, right? So of course, what you're not mentioning in the dating profile and even your marriage biodata is what are some of the red flags that you might have. Now, even more than so, everyone has their own thing, right? Uh, uh, I think pretty much everyone has some or the other thing going on. Um, some people might take it as a red flag, some people might not take it as a red flag. But a lot of it comes down to acceptance when it comes to relationships in general, right? Uh, so do you wanna, go ahead with that particular thing, or do you don't wanna go ahead with that particular thing, right? So that's how it is. Hoardings or ads, and we see this everywhere, right? This particular coaching institute had this much amount of students scoring a 99 percentage. Okay. Uh, but again, what we're neglecting is the other set of people who tried to be the same thing, but then they did not get those marks. But then suddenly your face is all over the town, and you're being celebrated on bus and whatnot, right? On buses and whatnot, right? So there's that. And again, I think I've talked enough about technology. So didn't quite know that this video will turn out to be, I think almost more than an hour. But hey, I sort of would like to keep and continue this format. The viewing times are horrible, what I've seen. People are watching for like 2 to 3 minutes, but I think I'll keep it this way because it gives me a chance to talk about things in depth, right? And also sometime later when I need to point things out to some people or share something to some people around this particular thing or any concept that I already have a video on, it helps. It helps me, right? And it just helps me get some of my own thoughts straight because initially when I started this video, I had no clue what I was going to talk about, of course, except for a few points. But then, yeah, the Bill Gates story and all that, I had no clue that I'll go and reach out there as well, right? But it turned out to be that way. So yeah, that brings us, to a close to this particular video. One thing that I'm also exploring, I have no clue why I'm saying this on, towards the end of this video, but here we go. Uh, so one thing that I probably want to explore is, just interviewing some of my close friends, right? Some of the things that they end up doing, some of the things that they like, who they are, and all that, right? I happen to have many Gen Z friends. I happen to have many, people who have just gotten into their bachelor's college, graduate college, and people in that particular phase of life, and pretty interesting characters, right? Uh, they're very confident. They are confident. I like that. They are pretty upfront. They can take the joke on themselves. They are not very serious when it comes to the reality of society which has already been set up, right? Out there. So I quite like that. So interesting people, interesting folks. So yeah, let's see, let's see how that turns out to be. Uh, but again, thank you for watching. See you in the next video.